This week's question comes from a contractor who said, hey Bill, I've got my desired net profit set for 10% in a given department. But when I'm using the job pricing calculator, it's coming up with numbers that are completely different. Why is that? Well, that is the topic of this week's Planning for Profit Minute. Let's dig into this just a little bit, right? If I look at my department, I can see my installation department on my dashboard here is set for a 10% net profit. In order to do that, I need to charge $87.36 per hour. Now, I can verify that same information by going into reports and looking at the net profit analysis report. Shows me the same information, right? I'm set for installation, desired net profit of 10%. And when I scroll down on this report, I can see under current, right, that 10% net profit, I would need to charge $87.36, and that will generate approximately $927,000 in total revenue. Now, with this same number, keep in mind the $87.36, that's my current rate. That's what I need to charge to hit that 10% net profit. Now let's go down to jobs in the job pricing calculator. And when I look at that, we're going to go into that and price out a given job, right? So I'm going to start out with, I'm going to go into my installation department. That's the department that we're looking at. And again, I can see here, set for a target of 10% net profit. So I'll simply scroll down and I'm going to enter in some data here. And we're going to say it's 2 guys, 1 day, 16 man hours. We've got $5,000 in equipment. And I can see my typical material markup and margin that's in here. I'll go ahead and click on calculate. And when I scroll down for this particular job, I can now see under current of $87.36, I charge $85.50. But when I look at it, that's generating a net profit of 26.58%. Well, wait a minute, what happened to the 10%? If my model was set that at $87.36 I'd be generating 10% net profit, why is this job giving me 26% net profit? Now you say, well, 26%, that sounds great, right? But the problem is you could price yourself right out of the market at that point. It just simply won't substantiate that. So why the difference? Right? Why is it that if this is the target number I need to do to hit 10%, is it generating so much higher? The answer is simply this, that your company has a typical ratio of materials to labor. This particular job just has a much higher percentage of materials compared to the labor that it's taking to put it in. For example, right? So we said we had 16 man hours. And we had $5,000 in materials. And that generated using my typical 30% margin, generated a 26% net profit on the job. Well, let's make one change, right? We're going to leave it there. Instead of $5,000 in materials, we've got $500. Okay, so if I simply make that one change, leave everything else exactly the same, and recalculate that, I can now see that my $87.36, I now charge $21.12 on this job, and our net profit dropped from that 28% or 26% down to 16.17. I can take that a little bit farther, right? Because in this example, we don't have nearly the percentage of materials that we did to labor. If I change this to $50 and recalculate that one, same amount of labor in there, same labor rate, $87.36, but now we can see we're generating 10.12%. So in this particular model that we've got here, again, we're now getting down to that typical ratio of labor to material that the entire year for my company has. So how do I fix this? How do I get it to where I want it to be? Well, let's go back to that original calculation, right? $5,000 in materials. And I'm going to hit calculate. That will take me back again just so you can see, right, at my $87.36 puts us back at the 26.58% net profit. Now, your company has a certain amount of overhead that you need to cover, right? That overhead is going to be covered either by material markup or by your labor rate, one or the other, right? Because that material markup is offsetting some of your overhead. And so the greater the material markup, therefore the more of my overhead that it's offsetting, right? I don't care if I lower the, so if I'm looking to, get on the other side, right, lower the actual net profit on the job to get it down in line with where it should be, because again, this number is just going to price me out of the job. I can either lower the labor rate or I can lower the material markup. Either one of them will do the same thing. And so on this particular job, what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to scroll up, because the easiest way to do that is to look right here at my material margin, right? So I was set for a 30%. I'm simply going to change that to a 20% margin here, because my target was 10% for the company, right? And so I'll even go 15% on this job. I think I can do that without pricing myself out of the job, right? So we'll hit calculate again. Now when I scrolled back down to that number, the 87.36, by lowering that number, we've dropped this down to 18% net profit. Now, again, you can see that we've got $1 increments up and down from that, actually $2 increments, right? And if I'm saying, okay, we can go down as low as 15%, right? There's 15.17. Right, so when I follow that one across, that means I priced this job out at $73.91, not the $8,500 that my original numbers were giving me. Right, so that might be the point at which we're going to price that job out, right? And we would choose that as our selling price, the $73.91. That will give me a 15% net profit. Now I could go a little bit farther, right? If I'm going, okay, but this is a competitive job, right? My target for the company is 10%. That's what I'm shooting for. Okay, I can just drop that material margin down a little bit more. Right? And again, don't get caught up on the fact, well, I can't only have 10%. Remember, you could drop down the labor rate in addition, right? It doesn't matter which one you drop down, as long as the net profit on the job is hitting your targets. So now at this point, when I've recalculated this at 10%, my $87 is now giving me 9.82, right? So I could actually increase that. Let's go up one notch to make sure that we're hitting at least 10%. Right, that means I would price this job out here at $6,985, and we'd still be hitting our 10% target that we're looking for in this particular department. So you can use this, simply edit that material markup or margin. So I can either increase it to get this percentage up to where it needs to be, or decrease it to get down to where I need to be to hit my targets, still be competitive, but hit the profitability targets that I'm looking for in this particular department. If you've got any questions on that, feel free to reach out to us. And that is this week's Planning for Profit Minute.